Hey guys, what's up, Zyflin here. I've been asked this question a lot on Twitch, and I just thought it was kind of worth it to make a video about it because, I mean, like, video settings are kind of like just something that people don't know a lot about whenever it comes to, like, making their game run smooth, and there was a bunch of optimization stuff added into the game with the Planes of Idle on, so I thought it was worth it to kind of make a video going over my settings because a lot of people, like how my game looks for whatever reason, and just kind of talk about it, really, because, I mean, people don't know a lot about it. And that's weird to me because this is like what I'm all about, like, video settings and stuff like that. So kind of weird. But yeah, I play on borderless full screen, and the reason I play on borderless full screen is because whenever I'm streaming, it just means that I can tab in and out of the game very easily. Warframe is very well optimized, which means, like, it's not going to crash or anything whenever you do tab out, and that, like, my system's pretty stable as well, so I haven't got, too insane overclocks or anything going, so, it's not going to completely, shit itself whenever I do tab out of the game, so that's a thing. I play in 1920 by 1080, but you should downscale this to match the resolution of the monitor that you're playing on. Obviously, if you're playing on a lower end machine, you may want to try to turn this down even more, because believe it or not, your video resolution is actually the biggest, or one of the biggest factors whenever it comes to sort of determining how well your game is going to run, right? Because as you turn up this slider right here, or this value, basically more pixels are going to be rendered into the game, or whatever, I guess you could say, and it's just going to take more processing power from your graphics card, or, Intel integrated graphics, if you dare play with that. So yeah, there's that. This is the refresh rate right here. This doesn't matter too much, but this is based off, like, the refresh rate of your monitor. It's basically like how often or how fast your monitor is going to sort of refresh. So, I believe this stands for like 240 frames per second type thing, if you get what I mean. So, like, it refreshes 240 times within a short period of time, if that makes any sense. I'm playing on a 1 millisecond monitor with a 240 hertz refresh rate, so it's basically like the amount of frames which kind of like render in within a given period of time, and the higher the number, the better, because the smoother your experience is going to be, type of thing. Obviously, you can look up more detailed videos on something like Tech Quickie or something, Linus Tech Tips, etc., and they'll obviously, help you out a little bit more. So next up, we have aspect ratio. This would matter a lot more in something like a competitive game, but this should just match the aspect ratio of your monitor. You may want to tinker with this if you're streaming Warframe or anything, but most people aren't going to be streaming Warframe, so, I mean, you don't really have to invest too much into tinkering with your aspect ratio. Just leave it on auto. Vsync, this is a weird one. I hate using Vsync in video games because I used to play a lot of competitive Counter-Strike, Rainbow Six Siege, etc. So whenever someone talks about vertical sync to me, I kind of just, like, tune out, and I'm like, no, that's the devil, I hate it. Because basically what vertical sync does, it's something that's added in the games to stop tearing. So, like, let's say you're playing a video game and you're not playing it on, like, the fastest monitor, or your FPS isn't keeping up or whatever. Basically what's going to happen is you'll see whenever you're jumping around, especially in Warframe, you'll see a lot of tearing in the environments and stuff like that. That's simply because, like, things aren't able to keep up with one another, like, things aren't being rendered in fast enough. And basically what vertical sync does is it sort of delays what you can see, so it makes sure that everything is rendered in before you can actually see it, right? So in a competitive environment, that's terrible because you want to make sure that you're always seeing the enemy first. But in something like Warframe, that doesn't really matter too much unless you want to be a professional Warframe player, question mark, I guess, so speedrun or whatever. So you definitely want to have vertical sync turned off unless you are, in my opinion, running on, like, lower end hardware. Max frame rate, this is basically just like the maximum amount of frame rate you want to go to. I leave mine at no limit, but whenever I'm streaming, I tend to put it at 60, just so, like, you don't see frame dips that much, if there is any. I know that's kind of weird, but it basically just means, like, there's not, like, a noticeable difference whenever I'm at, like, 120 FPS compared to whenever I'm 60 FPS, and there's a massive frame dip if I just limit my FPS at 60, right? So there's that. Next up, we have brightness, contrast, and field of view. I just leave brightness and contrast at 50. Field of view is at maximum, and then that's that. Enable screen shake. I don't really know why you'd ever want to have that. If you want to have it, go for it, but, that's just up to you, personal preference, right? Next up, we have the preset. So preset being custom because we're going to customize our settings here. And basically I have everything turned on apart from NVIDIA physics effects because I have to update my graphics cards, but you don't, well, my graphics card, sorry, I'm not that rich. I keep this turned off anyway because I just don't like the effect that it gives. I can turn it on, but I just choose not to. Runtime tessellation allows higher detail models to be loaded based on their distance to the player. If you have a lower end PC, turn this off. It will just basically mean that things will look shittier if they're further away. So, you know, that's fine. Local reflections enables reflecting surfaces on floors, walls, other various objects disable to improve performance. So this will give things like kind of like a glossy look if like light is reflecting off it in the game. So, you know, like let's say you're standing outside with a Soma or something and there's like a bunch of light shining on your Soma, you know, that will make it look like a little bit more glossier, I guess. Blur reflections here, so just like a blur effect, which will be added in whenever, you know, a blur, which is, or not a blur, but like a reflection that's very intense kind of shines off your weapon. Volumetric lighting, light rays and lit fog effects disable to improve performance. Obviously anything here you can disable to improve performance. So high dynamic range allows lighting to be used in greater detail, including in both darker and brighter scenes. Pretty good. Adaptive exposure, balance the lighting exposure throughout the level. We have glare here. Obviously you guys know what that is. Like if light is reflecting off glass or something, you get the glare effect. Ambient occlusion allows more accurate light and exposure across many surfaces. High shader quality, greatly improve the shader quality, disable to improve performance. So basically all this here stuff you can disable if you want to have more FPS, but I wouldn't recommend disabling all of them because Warframe is kind of a pretty game. Next up we have our dynamic resolution, and this is what is going to make or break your performance whenever it comes to lower NPCs. So like, let's say you're playing on a really shitty PC, you want to turn this all the way down to 50, and what'll happen is the game will look terrible, but it'll run smooth. So this is like a resolution sort of scaling up, if you get what I mean. So it'll like, it's kind of like, think of it like a multiplier, I guess you could say. The lower the value, then the less pixels that have to be rendered in type of thing. That's an easy way to think about it. And the less pixels that are being rendered in appropriately, then the easier the game is to run for your graphics card or integrated graphics. So that's the thing. But if you have a beefy graphics card, keep it at 100. If you have a shit one, put it down to 50, or just kind of test your limits, you know. I usually like to stay above 60 FPS in every game that I play. It's just a thing. But for those of you who are coming from console or whatever, you can just put it to 30 FPS and you guys won't notice like a difference or whatever. But just go ahead and keep this at auto if you're not bothered about that. And then next up we have like all the other fancy options. So we have geometry detail, and this is just basically like the detail of everything in the game. Obviously I have all this at high because I like to stream the game and make it look pretty. So we'll talk a little bit more about these here things in a minute because these things don't actually help you that much. But you know, changes the amount of detail used for geometry and levels. You decrease it to improve performance. The amount of particles that can be seen when casting abilities in certain levels. Really cool looking. Shadow quality speaks for itself. Texture memory, so basically like how much of the video memory or your VRAM or your graphics card can be dedicated to rendering in textures. Keep this in high because you want to make sure that you know, you're using the maximum potential of your graphics card, right? So you want to put this at high, in my opinion. So just at all times, because unless you're running something in the background which is using your graphics card, then I mean, keep this up in my opinion. Okay, so we have this anti-aliasing stuff here. Basically keep all this stuff off because all this really does is like makes edges sharper, and that's great and everything, and it'll make your game look a lot better, like, but only a tiny bit, so you don't really need it. And this is just going to chop off a lot of FPS as well. So, you know, allows smoother transition between textures. You can throw that there on as well, but you don't need it. You know, it's fine, but you don't need it. All that will happen is like you might see a texture here and there which doesn't look pretty, and then it'll turn pretty. You know, so just keep it off. It'll keep your performance up. Anti-aliasing, again, just keep this turned off because all it's going to do is take up a lot of your FPS, and you don't want that. Moving on to depth of field, causes objects that are in focus to appear sharp, while distant objects appear blurry, disable to improve performance. So you know, it just makes things look sharper. It's fine. Motion blur, this is personal preference. It just means it's going to be blurry. Bloom, I have this turned on to 25. I wanted to keep a little bit of bloom, but I didn't want a lot of it, so I just turned it down to 25 because why not? Color correction I have turned on. I know a lot of people won't like that, but I think it makes the game look a lot better. Dynamic lighting, obviously I have this turned on. Allows certain areas to become illuminated when they come in contact with certain lights. I think it's cool. Character shadows, keep it on. Enables use of shadows and characters, keep it on. Constant weapon trail, this is just like the weapon trail that comes from your melee weapon. Whenever you're running around, you can turn this on or off, personal preference. And then weapon elemental effects, keep it on because it just lets you know what element you're running in your melee weapon. So it just makes more sense to me. But anyway, that is going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, go ahead and hit the like button below. If you want to see more Warframe content from me, hit subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.